Please don't leave. The little black girl cried to the biker as a locked classroom door shut behind them hard. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the story. It was a quiet afternoon at Wilson Middle School, but for little Amara, the day would soon take a turn that would change her life forever. Amara, a small girl with big, wide eyes and dark braids, was sitting at her desk, trying to focus on her schoolwork. But her mind kept racing. Every time she glanced up, her classmates were whispering, laughing, and pointing at her. Amara had always been a quiet child, and the teasing had become something she was used to, but today, something felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. Her heart raced in her chest, and she could feel the sweat forming on the back of her neck. She glanced at the clock. Only 10 more minutes until the bell rang, but it felt like an eternity. Suddenly, the door to the classroom slammed shut, and Amara's heart skipped a beat. She looked over, and to her horror, she saw a familiar face, a face that made her blood run cold. It was her stepfather, Greg. He had come to pick her up early today, but he wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't allowed to pick her up without her mother's permission. Amara's hands trembled as she tried to stay calm. She had promised herself that she wouldn't let him intimidate her anymore. But today was different. Greg's eyes were cold, angry. His presence alone made the room feel smaller, suffocating. Amara quickly glanced around the room, hoping someone would notice, someone would help. But no one was paying attention. No one ever did. As Greg stepped closer to the door, he slammed it shut behind him, locking the classroom door with a loud, unmistakable click. Amara's stomach turned as she realized what was happening. She was trapped. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. She had to do something. She had to get away. Desperation filled her every thought as she slowly stood up from her desk. Her legs felt weak, but she knew she had to move fast. She had no idea what Greg would do to her if no one came to stop him. That was when she saw him, the man she had never expected to be her savior. In the hallway outside, a biker stood, looking down at her with a concerned expression. His leather jacket glinted in the dim light of the hallway, and his strong, steady gaze locked onto hers. Without a word, he stepped forward, pushing open the door and stepping into the classroom, blocking the only way out. Amara's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "Please don't leave. They're going to hurt me." She had no idea who this man was, but at that moment, he was her only hope. The biker didn't hesitate for a second. He stepped forward, placing himself between Amara and the locked door. He looked down at her with a soft, reassuring smile. "You're safe now," he said, his deep voice full of calm and strength. The biker turned to face Greg, his expression now hardening into something fierce. Greg took a step back, his hands clenching into fists. For the first time, he seemed uncertain, like he wasn't in control anymore. The biker didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "You need to leave. Now." Amara watched in awe as the man, with a calm confidence that made her feel safe, stood up to the person who had caused her so much fear. It was a moment she would never forget, the moment a stranger stepped in to protect her when no one else had. Little did she know, this biker's decision to stand up for her would spark a chain of events that would change her life forever. Amara stood frozen, tears streaking down her face, as the biker stood between her and her stepfather. The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but there was something about the biker's presence that made her feel safe for the first time in what felt like forever. She had spent so many nights lying awake, terrified of what might happen if her stepfather ever got too angry, too violent. But now, in this moment, she wasn't alone. The man in front of her was ready to fight for her, to protect her. It was something Amara had never imagined would happen, not in a million years. Greg, her stepfather, was no small man. He had always used his size and power to control her and her mother. But this biker, a stranger, seemed unfazed by his threats. The biker stood tall, his eyes never leaving Greg, exuding a calm, quiet strength that was almost unnerving. Greg's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Amara could see doubt flicker in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged. He stepped forward, fists clenched, but the biker didn't flinch. Instead, he squared his shoulders and spoke again, his voice firm but calm. "I said, you need to leave. Now." For a moment, neither of them moved. The room was eerily silent, the tension palpable. Greg's eyes darted to the door, and Amara could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was calculating his next move. The biker was ready. He wasn't backing down. And then, without warning, Greg lunged. He pushed the biker aside, but the biker's reflexes were lightning fast. He grabbed Greg by the wrist, twisting it with enough force to make Greg stumble. "Don't touch me again," the biker growled. Amara couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her stepfather, the man who had terrified her for so long, was on the ground, struggling to break free from the biker's grip. It was like a dream, a surreal moment where the person who had always had power over her was now helpless. Greg scrambled to his feet, his face turning red with rage. "You don't know who you're messing with," he snarled, but the biker didn't respond. Instead, he kept his gaze locked on Greg, refusing to back down. "You're not taking her," the biker said, his voice steady, unyielding. "She's not going anywhere with you." Greg took a step back, his anger still boiling, but there was fear in his eyes now. The biker wasn't just some random stranger. He was someone who wasn't afraid to take a stand. And in that moment, Greg realized he wasn't going to win this fight. He glanced at Amara one last time, his face twisted with anger, before he turned and stormed out of the classroom, slamming the door behind him. Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her as the door slammed shut. She had never felt so free, so safe, in her entire life. The biker turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Amara nodded, still in shock from what had just happened. She didn't know who this man was, but in that moment, he was her hero. The biker smiled and extended his hand to her. "I'm Forge," he said. "You're safe now, kid." Amara took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his strong, weathered hand. She didn't know where this would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. This man had just saved her life, and she would never forget it. Forge helped Amara to her feet and turned to the rest of the bikers who had gathered outside the classroom, watching the scene unfold. They had arrived just in time, ready to back Forge up if things had escalated. But it hadn't come to that. For now, at least, the danger had passed. "You're all right, kid?" one of the bikers asked, his voice deep and reassuring. Amara nodded again, still in shock. The realization that she was safe, really safe, was starting to sink in, and it was almost too much to process. She had been living in fear for so long, and now, in a matter of minutes, her whole world had changed. Forge knelt down to her level, his expression serious but kind. "Listen, kid, I need to make sure you're taken care of. We're going to get you out of here and figure out what to do next." Amara's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in a long time, someone was actually looking out for her. Someone cared. It was a feeling she wasn't used to, but it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. As Forge and the other bikers led her out of the school, she looked back at the classroom one last time. The door had been slammed shut, and her stepfather was gone. But she knew that she wasn't the same little girl who had walked into that room just a few hours ago. She had been saved, not by a teacher, not by the law, but by a group of strangers who had decided to stand up for her when no one else would. As the door slammed shut behind them, Amara could hardly believe what had just happened. For so many years, she had lived in fear of her stepfather's control, but now, she was standing outside that classroom, with a group of bikers who had just saved her from the nightmare she had endured. The cool evening air hit her face as Forge and the others led her away from the school, their motorcycles roaring to life in the parking lot. The sight of the bikes, the rumbling engines, and the leather-clad figures surrounding her made her feel like she had stepped into another world. For the first time, she felt like she was truly safe. Forge looked down at her, his face still serious but softened by concern. "We're going to take you somewhere safe, Amara," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. She nodded, her small hands still trembling. She didn't know what was next, but she knew she had to follow these strangers who had become her protectors. As they walked toward the motorcycles, one of the bikers, a tall man with a thick beard named Diesel, stepped forward. He looked down at Amara with a warm, friendly smile. "You ready to ride, kid?" he asked, his voice low and comforting. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She had never been on a motorcycle before, but the idea of escaping, of leaving everything behind, was more than enough to make her forget any fear. She nodded and climbed onto Diesel's bike, her small body wedged between him and the seat. The bike roared to life beneath her, and for the first time in a long while, Amara felt a rush of excitement, a feeling that she had never experienced in the oppressive life she had led. The group of bikers formed a convoy as they sped through the streets, their motorcycles cutting through the night like a wave of freedom. The wind whipped through Amara's hair as she held on tight, her eyes wide with wonder and relief. It felt like a dream, like she was finally escaping from everything that had held her down. But there was something more in the air now, something Amara couldn't quite place, a sense of hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As they drove through the quiet streets, Forge pulled up next to Diesel's bike, his eyes catching Amara's in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there, kid?" he asked. Amara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to speak, to tell them how grateful she was, but the words wouldn't come. She had never known kindness like this, never known what it felt like to be protected, truly protected, by someone who wasn't forced to care. The convoy continued on, weaving through the empty roads, heading for the place Forge had promised would be safe. The bikers had already made plans to get Amara to a nearby safe house, a place where she could finally escape the control of her stepfather and start over. Amara didn't know what her future held, but in that moment, she had the faintest glimmer of hope. After what felt like hours, they finally arrived at the safe house, a quiet, secluded house tucked away on the edge of town. It was a far cry from the cramped, dark apartment she had grown up in, and as she stepped off the bike, she could already feel the weight lifting off her shoulders. Forge turned to her as they all gathered at the entrance. "You're safe now," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "We'll take care of you." Amara looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone. Inside the safe house, the bikers made sure Amara had everything she needed: food, a warm bed, and most importantly, the sense of security that had been missing from her life for so long. As the night wore on, Amara sat in the living room, her mind racing with everything that had happened. She had no idea what her life would look like from here on out, but she knew one thing for sure: she would never forget the people who had saved her. They weren't just bikers. They were her family now, and for the first time in her life, Amara felt like she was finally home. The next morning, Amara woke up in a room she had never seen before, but it felt like the safest place in the world. She lay there for a moment, letting the silence of the room wash over her. The soft sound of wind outside and the smell of fresh coffee brewing downstairs made her realize how much had changed in the past 24 hours. For the first time in years, she wasn't waking up to the sound of her stepfather's shouting or the heavy, oppressive silence that had filled her old home. Here, in this quiet house, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. The night before, Forge and the other bikers had made sure she was settled in, giving her food and a warm bed. She could hear the sounds of the other bikers talking in the kitchen downstairs, their voices low and friendly. It was like a family that didn't judge her or treat her like she was invisible. Amara's mind still raced, trying to process everything that had happened. She had always thought that no one would ever care enough to help her. But now, here she was, with a group of strangers who had become her protectors. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment when Forge had stepped in front of her stepfather, his calm, unwavering presence making all the difference. She had never seen anyone stand up to Greg like that before. It had been like a scene from a movie, a moment where someone finally fought back against the man who had ruled her life with fear. Amara sat up slowly, the sunlight streaming through the curtains casting a soft glow across the room. She got out of bed and walked over to the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. It was so different from the chaos she had come from. She hadn't realized how much she had longed for peace until now. A knock at the door broke her thoughts, and Forge's voice called out from the other side. "Amara, you up?" "Yeah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She hadn't spoken much since arriving, still in shock from everything that had happened. The door opened, and Forge stepped inside, his tall figure filling the doorway. "How are you doing?" he asked, his expression soft but serious. "I'm okay," Amara said, looking down at her hands. She wasn't sure what to say, how to express the overwhelming emotions she was feeling. You're safe here, Forge said, his voice steady. I know it's a lot to process, but we'll take it one step at a time. Amara nodded, still not sure what to say, but there was something about Forge's calm demeanor that made her feel like everything would be okay. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a chance. Forge stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. We're not going anywhere, Amara, he said. We've got your back. Those simple words meant more to her than anything else. In that moment, Amara realized that for the first time, she wasn't alone. There were people who cared about her, people who would protect her no matter what. She wasn't just a victim of her circumstances anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that would give her the strength to move forward. After a few moments, Forge gave her a small smile. How about you come downstairs and have some breakfast with the rest of us? Amara hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing. For the first time in years, she had a place where she belonged. As she followed Forge downstairs, she could feel the warmth of the house surrounding her. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the air, and for the first time in so long, Amara felt like she could breathe. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. The bikers made sure she had everything she needed: food, clothes, and most importantly, the security that had been missing from her life for so long. As the days passed, Amara began to open up more, sharing her story with the bikers and slowly starting to trust them. They didn't push her, didn't force her to talk before she was ready. They were patient, kind, and protective. They treated her like family, and for the first time in a long time, Amara felt like she was part of something real. But as much as she appreciated the safety they had given her, there was still a part of her that worried about her stepfather. Would he come looking for her? Would he try to hurt her again? Forge seemed to sense her unease. One evening, as Amara sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, he came outside and sat beside her. You're thinking about him, aren't you? He asked gently. Amara nodded, her eyes focused on the fading light. I just don't know what's going to happen, she said, her voice barely audible. Forge placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We won't let him hurt you again, he said firmly. Whatever happens, we've got you. His words gave Amara a sense of comfort, but deep down, she knew that the road ahead would still be difficult. Her stepfather wouldn't give up so easily. But with the bikers by her side, Amara knew she could face whatever came next. She wasn't alone anymore. Amara woke up the next morning feeling a little lighter than she had the day before. The sunlight filtering through the curtains seemed warmer, and the cool morning air felt different on her skin. It wasn't just the weather that was changing, it was her life. She had been given a chance to start fresh, to leave behind the dark shadows of her past, and now she could breathe. The bikers, who had quickly become more than just protectors, had made sure she felt at home in their safe house. Forge, Diesel, and the others had kept their promise. They were keeping her safe, and they weren't going anywhere. Forge had told her the night before that the bikers would be setting up a more permanent plan for her protection. She didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but she trusted them. Amara had always been on her own, relying on herself and her mother to survive. But now, she was part of something else, something real. She wasn't alone anymore. She was family. The house was quiet in the morning, the only sounds being the occasional creak of the floorboards and the soft hum of the coffee machine in the kitchen. As Amara wandered downstairs, she found Forge sitting at the table with a cup of coffee in front of him, a map spread out across the surface. Diesel was beside him, holding a mug as well. They looked up when they heard her footsteps. Morning, Amara, Forge said with a warm smile. Sleep well? Yeah, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. It was strange, but in a good way. She hadn't slept this soundly in years. Forge gestured to the chair across from him. Come sit. We need to talk about what comes next. Amara walked over and took a seat. Diesel leaned back in his chair, his hands resting on his knees, as Forge began to speak. We've got a plan for you, Forge said, his voice steady. We're going to get you somewhere where you can start fresh, away from all this mess. Amara listened intently, her heart racing a little. What do you mean? Like a new home? She asked. Forge nodded. Something like that. We've got connections. You'll be safe. But we need to move fast. Your stepfather is not going to give up. And we've heard rumors that he's already been asking around, trying to find you. Amara's stomach dropped at the thought of Greg searching for her, but Forge continued. We've got a few safe houses set up around the area, but we'll need to make sure he doesn't track you down. So, we're moving you out of here in the next couple of days. We'll get you set up with a new identity, a new life. No one will know where you are. Amara nodded slowly, taking it all in. It sounded like the kind of plan she'd never imagined possible. She had never had the luxury of thinking about a future beyond just surviving. But now, for the first time, it seemed like there was something more. Forge looked at Diesel, and Diesel nodded. We'll be right there with you, Amara, Diesel said. No matter what. You've got a family now. Amara felt a lump form in her throat. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said something like that to her. Someone who wasn't just trying to get something from her. This wasn't just talk. These people, this family, were real. Thank you, she said softly. Forge smiled and stood up, folding the map and tucking it into his jacket. No need to thank us, kid. We've got your back. Now, let's get you something to eat. You're going to need your strength for the next part. The day passed in a blur of new information and quiet conversations. The bikers were busy, making preparations to move Amara and ensure her safety. They didn't talk much about her stepfather, but Amara could sense the urgency in their actions. Forge made sure she had everything she needed, and as the day went on, Amara couldn't help but feel a sense of hope building inside her. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to have in years. That night, as Amara sat on the porch, looking out at the stars, Forge came to sit next to her. You okay? He asked, his voice low and kind. Amara nodded, her eyes still on the sky. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand all this. It's a lot. I get it, Forge said. But we're going to make sure you're safe. That's what matters right now. We'll handle everything else. Amara looked at him, her heart full. Thank you, she said again, the words more meaningful this time. For everything. Forge gave her a reassuring smile. You don't need to thank us. We're family now, and we take care of family. Amara sat there in the silence, feeling the weight of those words. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't worried about what was coming next. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was ready to face it. And no matter what happened, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. Amara had never known life to move so quickly, nor had she ever felt so unsure of what was coming next. But in the chaos, there was one thing she knew for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. Forge, Diesel, and the others made sure she felt as comfortable as possible, but the reality of her situation still weighed heavily on her. It was hard to forget that Greg might be out there looking for her. Forge had made it clear that they were moving her to a new location soon, but the uncertainty still lingered. She spent the next few nights in the safe house, surrounded by people who were doing everything they could to protect her, but her mind kept drifting back to her past. She couldn't forget the way her stepfather's face twisted with rage, the way he had controlled everything in her life. But for the first time, she wasn't scared. Every time she started to feel anxious, Forge's calm voice would echo in her mind, reminding her that she was safe now. One evening, after dinner, Forge and Diesel sat with her at the kitchen table, going over the final details of her move. We'll be leaving tomorrow, Forge said, his eyes serious but kind. It's going to be a long drive, but we're going to get you to a place where you can start fresh. Amara nodded, trying to push down the nervousness that was starting to build again. What if he finds me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if Greg comes looking? Diesel leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. We've covered all the bases, he said. We've got people watching, and we'll make sure you're settled in before you can even think about him finding you. You're not alone, Forge added, his voice steady. We're family, and that means we stick together. No one's getting past us. Amara felt a sense of comfort at their words. She had never had anyone fight for her like this before. The thought of leaving the safe house, leaving the bikers who had become her protectors, was frightening, but she knew it was the only way forward. She would never be truly free if she stayed in hiding. The next morning, the bikers prepared to leave. The safe house was a small place, nothing extravagant, but it had been a haven for Amara during the past few days. Now, as the time came to leave, she realized how much she had grown to depend on it. As they packed up, Amara looked around one last time. The house had been a place of refuge, but it wasn't her future. She had to keep moving forward. Forge gave her a reassuring smile as she approached the bikes. "Ready, kid?" he asked. Amara nodded, her nerves still there, but fading into the background. "Yeah," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The bikers mounted their motorcycles, and Amara climbed onto Diesel's bike once again, this time feeling a little more confident. The roar of the engines filled the air, and the convoy began its journey, driving through quiet streets, past familiar landmarks, and into the unknown. Amara kept her eyes forward, focusing on the road ahead. Every mile felt like a step closer to freedom, but there was still a part of her that couldn't quite believe it. Was she really going to be safe? Was she going to be okay? It felt like everything had changed so quickly. The bikers rode in formation, their machines growling as they cut through the air. There was something about the steady hum of the engines that brought Amara comfort. She wasn't sure why, but it made her feel like she was part of something bigger, something that couldn't be undone. As the hours passed, Amara's nerves began to settle. The journey was long, and she could feel the tension in the air, but there was also something liberating about being on the road, moving toward a new life. She thought about everything Forge had said, how they were family, how they would protect her no matter what. It was hard to let go of the fear, but it was starting to become easier. As they drove through the countryside, Forge's voice crackled over the radio. "We'll stop for fuel in about 20 minutes, he said. "After that, we'll head straight for the safe house." Amara looked around, taking in the open space and the vastness of the road ahead. She couldn't help but feel a sense of possibility, something she had never allowed herself to feel. Maybe this was what it felt like to be free. They reached the gas station, and the bikers pulled in, one by one. Amara climbed off the bike, stretching her legs as she stood next to Diesel. The bikers quickly fueled up and checked their gear, but Amara noticed that Forge kept looking around, his eyes scanning the area. She knew that it wasn't just routine. They were being careful. No one was taking chances. After a quick stop, the group was back on the road. The sun was starting to set, casting a soft golden light over the highway. Amara could feel her heart beating in her chest, but it wasn't out of fear anymore. It was something else, a feeling she hadn't had in so long. Hope. For the first time, she wasn't running from something. She was running toward something better. The bikers rode on, their engines roaring in the distance, and Amara knew that no matter what came next, she had the strength to face it. She was finally on her way to a new life, and with Forge and the others by her side, she wasn't scared anymore. The ride had been long, but the distance felt like nothing compared to what Amara had been through in her life. The landscape outside the motorcycle helmet shielded her from the outside world, but her thoughts still roamed free. She watched the miles pass by, feeling a mixture of anxiety and relief, knowing that each mile brought her closer to something new. The convoy of bikers rode in formation, each motorcycle humming steadily as they cut through the open roads. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the highway. The sky turned from blue to orange and pink, and for the first time in a long time, Amara felt like she was actually moving forward. Forge, Diesel, and the other bikers led the way, navigating through the winding roads as Amara stayed close behind, on Diesel's bike. Every now and then, she caught glimpses of the other bikers, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses and bandanas, but their presence was reassuring. She had never felt like this before, protected, supported, and most of all, free. She was leaving behind everything that had defined her existence until now. Her stepfather's control, the fear, the constant feeling of being trapped. It was all behind her. Still, part of her couldn't shake the thought of Greg. She knew he wouldn't just let her go without a fight. What would happen if he tracked her down? What if he showed up where she was going? The fear bubbled up again, but each time it did, she thought of Forge's words, of the bikers who had promised to keep her safe. They had made it clear they wouldn't let anyone hurt her again. As the group approached a small town, the tension that had been building inside Amara reached its peak. Forge had told her that they would stop for the night at a nearby motel before continuing the journey, but Amara couldn't shake the sense of unease. They had been on the road for hours, and now, she had no idea what awaited her. Would she be able to adjust to this new life? Forge pulled off the highway, and the rest of the bikers followed him into a parking lot, where a small, unassuming motel stood. It wasn't much, just a few rooms and a neon sign buzzing overhead, but it was far enough off the main road that it would be safe for the night. Amara's nerves were on edge as they parked the bikes and dismounted. She felt like everyone was watching them, but that was just her paranoia talking. Forge turned to her, his expression soft but serious. "We'll get you settled inside. You can rest for a while. We'll take shifts keeping watch, and then we'll hit the road again tomorrow." Amara nodded, grateful for the brief respite. Diesel and the others went to check in at the front desk, and Forge gave her a reassuring smile before heading off to help. As she walked to the room, her thoughts returned to Greg. What if he was already looking for her? The bikers couldn't protect her forever. What if they couldn't stop him? But as soon as she entered the room, she found herself pausing. The simple, unassuming space was like a breath of fresh air. There was no fear, no tension. It was just a room, a bed, and the sound of silence around her. For the first time in ages, she felt like she could rest. She sat down on the bed, letting out a long breath. She didn't know how long it had been since she had truly felt safe, but now, as she sat there, she realized how much she had taken for granted in the past. Forge and the bikers hadn't just given her a place to stay. They had given her a chance to feel like she mattered, like her life had value. The weight of that hit her all at once. She felt tears welling in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She didn't want to cry. Not now, not after everything. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to let herself fall apart. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She stood up quickly and opened it to find Diesel standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want something hot," he said, handing her a cup. Amara smiled, taking the coffee gratefully. "Thanks," she said softly. Diesel gave her a nod, then stepped inside, leaning against the wall. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said after a moment, his voice low. "But you're doing great. You've got a strong head on your shoulders." Amara looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. She didn't know how to respond. I don't know what to expect anymore," she admitted. Diesel took a sip of his coffee before responding. "That's normal," he said. "When you've been through what you've been through, it takes time to trust again. But you've got us. And we'll make sure you get to where you need to be, no matter what." Amara nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she had a team behind her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Diesel gave her a final smile before heading out the door, leaving her with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. As she sat back down on the bed, she thought about the road ahead. She had no idea where it would take her, but she knew she was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, Amara felt hope. She wasn't running from her past anymore. She was moving toward her future. The following morning, Amara woke up to the sound of distant motorcycles rumbling in the parking lot. The bikers were already preparing to hit the road. The motel room, though simple, had provided her with the rest she needed, and now she felt ready to face whatever came next. As she got out of bed and stretched, she noticed the sun had barely risen, casting soft golden light across the landscape. She walked over to the window, looking out at the open road. It felt symbolic to her. Every mile behind her was a step away from the life she had been trapped in for so long. But the road ahead was still unknown, and a small part of her couldn't help but feel nervous. What if Greg was out there, searching for her? Forge had assured her they were safe, but the fear still lingered in her chest. She quickly pushed the thoughts aside, reminding herself that she wasn't alone anymore. The bikers were with her, and they would do everything in their power to protect her. The door creaked open, and Forge stepped in, his face carrying the calm determination she had come to rely on. "Morning, kid," he said, his voice warm. "You ready to get back on the road?" Amara smiled, though it was a little shaky. "I think so," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Forge smiled back. "Good. We're moving out soon. We've got a safe house lined up, but we'll need to make sure we're not being followed." He paused for a moment, his eyes scanning her face. "How are you doing?" he asked, his voice softer now. Amara hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what to expect. I'm still thinking about about Greg. I don't know if I can ever truly feel safe again." Forge's expression softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I understand," he said gently. "But we'll make sure he doesn't get to you. You've been through a lot, Amara. It's okay to feel scared, but you're stronger than you know." His words gave her a small measure of comfort, but the road ahead still seemed uncertain. "We're all in this together," he continued. "And we'll keep you safe, no matter what." Just stick with us, and you'll be okay. Amara nodded, her chest still tight, but she knew he was right. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to turn back now. The bikers had kept their word, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could trust someone. Thanks, she said, her voice steady. I'm ready. Forge smiled and turned toward the door. All right, let's get you packed up. We'll head out in a few minutes. Amara followed him out to the parking lot, where the bikers were finishing their preparations. Diesel was checking his bike, while a couple of the others were refueling. Amara felt a wave of gratitude wash over her as she looked at them. They weren't just bikers, they were her protectors now, her family. She could never have imagined that a group of strangers would care so much about her, but they had proven time and again that they would do whatever it took to make sure she was safe. She approached Diesel, who looked up with a smile as she got closer. How's it going, kid? He asked. Ready for another day on the road? Amara smiled back, feeling a little less nervous. Yeah, I think I am, she said. Diesel gave her a thumbs up and nodded. Good to hear. We'll get you to the next place safe and sound. The bikers finished getting ready, and soon they were all mounted on their motorcycles, engines roaring to life. Forge led the way, and Amara followed closely behind Diesel, the sound of the bikes filling the air as they hit the road once again. The scenery passed by in a blur, and for the first time, Amara allowed herself to enjoy the ride. She still had a long way to go, but as they rode through the open countryside, she felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. The sun was high in the sky now, and the air was warm. She felt the wind against her face, and for the first time in a long time, she could breathe deeply without fear. She was free. After several hours on the road, they pulled into another small town, where Forge had arranged for them to stop for a quick break. The bikers parked their motorcycles outside a small diner, and Amara stepped off the bike, feeling the strain in her muscles from the long ride. As they entered the diner, she was greeted with the familiar warmth of friendly faces. The staff was kind, and for a moment, Amara felt like she was just another person, not someone running from the past. She took a seat at a booth with Forge, Diesel, and the others, and they ordered their food. It wasn't much, but the food was comforting. As they ate, Amara glanced out the window, watching the world go by. She was still processing everything, still adjusting to this new reality. But the longer she spent with these bikers, the more she realized that this could be the beginning of a new chapter for her. A chapter where she was no longer controlled by fear, no longer trapped by her past. She could finally have a future, and she wasn't going to let anything take that away from her. The sun was beginning to set as the group of bikers continued their journey down the quiet back roads. Amara sat on Diesel's bike, her body pressed against the leather of the seat, feeling the steady rhythm of the engine beneath her. The wind whipped through her hair, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. The noise of the world seemed to fade away as she focused on the road ahead. She was finally on the path to something better, something she could call her own. The diner stop earlier had been a welcome break, and though the food had been simple, there had been an undeniable comfort in the warmth of the small town. It had felt like a fleeting glimpse of normality, like a life she might have had if things had been different. But she knew that it wasn't just normality she was after. It was freedom. The kind of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. For so long, her life had been defined by fear. Fear of Greg, fear of the next blow, the next harsh word. But now, as they moved forward, she was starting to understand that fear wasn't the only thing she could feel. She could feel hope. She could feel a future. And it was all thanks to the bikers who had taken her in, given her a place to stay, and promised to protect her. Forge had become more than just a protector. He had become a symbol of the strength she had been searching for. The strength to break free from her past, the courage to stand up for herself. As they drove, Forge's voice crackled through the radio, pulling her from her thoughts. We'll stop in another hour, he said. Just keep an eye out. We don't know if Greg's people are still looking for you. We've got a few contacts keeping tabs, but we're not taking any chances. Amara's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Greg's name. She had tried not to think about him, but the thought of him finding her, of him hurting her again, still haunted her. She pushed the thought aside. I'm okay, she whispered to herself, trying to believe it. Diesel glanced over his shoulder, noticing her unease. You're doing great, kid, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. We've got your back. You're stronger than you think. His words gave her a little more strength, but there was still a part of her that wasn't sure if she could truly escape her past. A few minutes later, the group reached a remote gas station on the outskirts of town. It was small, tucked away between a few dilapidated buildings, but it was the perfect place for a quick stop. The bikers pulled in and began refueling, making sure their bikes were in top shape for the remainder of the trip. Amara stood next to Diesel's bike, watching them work. She wasn't used to being part of a group like this. She had spent so much of her life isolated, forced to fend for herself. But with the bikers, she was starting to understand what it meant to have people who cared about you, people who would fight for you. As Forge and the others finished up, Diesel came over to her. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing the quiet look on her face. "Yeah," Amara said, nodding slowly. "I'm just thinking about everything. It's a lot to take in." Diesel chuckled softly. "I get that. It's a lot of change, but you're adjusting better than most people would. You've got the right people with you." Amara smiled faintly, feeling a small wave of gratitude wash over her. For the first time, she wasn't facing the future alone. Diesel clapped her on the back and nodded toward the bikes. "We've still got a long way to go, but we'll get you there." As the bikers mounted their bikes again, Amara climbed back onto Diesel's bike, her hands gripping the handlebars. She glanced at Forge, who was already leading the group down the road, his motorcycle slicing through the air like a beacon of safety. She felt the weight of the moment, the finality of it all. She was leaving her past behind, moving toward a new life. The road stretched out before her, open and endless, a symbol of the future she could now have. They rode for another few hours, the sun sinking lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the horizon. The road seemed to stretch on forever, but Amara wasn't afraid. She was with people who had proven that they would do anything to keep her safe. As they pulled into another small town, Forge made a sharp turn off the main road, leading them into a quiet, tree-lined area. The houses here were old but well-maintained, and the air was quiet, peaceful. It was a world away from the chaos she had known. Forge signaled for the group to stop in front of a modest house. "This is it," he said, turning to face Amara. "This is where you'll be safe for a while. We've set it up for you to lay low." Amara looked at the house, her heart pounding. It was small, but it felt like a sanctuary. The thought of staying here, in this quiet place, felt like a dream. But it was real. This was her new reality. Forge helped her off the bike, and the others began to unload their gear. Amara stood there, taking in the sight of the house. She felt a lump form in her throat, but this time, it wasn't fear that caused it. It was something else, something she hadn't felt in years. "Hope. You're safe here," Forge said, his voice steady. "This is your new beginning, Amara." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. This was it. This was her chance to finally be free. She wasn't running anymore. She was starting a new chapter of her life. And with the bikers by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments, simple routines, and the slow but steady process of Amara adjusting to her new life. The house that Forge had set up for her was far from luxurious, but it was peaceful. It was a far cry from the chaos she had known for so long. Each morning, she woke up to the sound of birds singing outside the window, the sunlight streaming through the curtains. It felt like a dream, an ordinary life, something she had longed for but never thought she would have. Forge, Diesel, and the other bikers checked in regularly, making sure she was okay and that everything was running smoothly. They treated her like family, always asking if she needed anything, but giving her the space to find her own way. For the first time in a long time, Amara felt like she had the freedom to breathe, to think for herself. But there was still a part of her that couldn't shake the memories of her past, the nights she spent hiding in her room, the fear that followed her every step. She couldn't forget about Greg. He was still out there somewhere, and that fear lingered like a shadow, just beyond her reach. She had to remind herself, though, that she was safe now. The bikers had kept their promise, and they weren't going anywhere. One afternoon, as Amara was sitting in the living room, reading a book, there was a knock at the door. She hesitated for a moment, wondering who it could be. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to find Diesel standing there, a concerned look on his face. "Hey, you got a minute?" he asked. Amara nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "What's up?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Diesel closed the door behind him and looked around the room, his expression serious. We got word that Greg might be getting closer, he said quietly. He's been asking around. We need to make sure you're ready if things go south. Amara's heart skipped a beat at the mention of Greg's name. She had known this day might come, but hearing it out loud made it feel all too real. What do you mean, ready? She asked, her voice tight. Diesel paused for a moment, his eyes locking onto hers. We've been keeping tabs on him, but we need to be prepared. We don't know how far he's willing to go to find you. We're not going to let him get to you, but we need to know that you're ready for whatever happens. Amara swallowed hard, feeling a rush of emotions, fear, anxiety, and a strange sense of determination. She had spent so long running, so long hiding. But now, for the first time, she wasn't going to be the one running anymore. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice steady. Diesel nodded, clearly approving of her resolve. We'll make sure you're safe, no matter what. But we need to be prepared. I'm going to help you with a few things, just in case. Forge wants us to keep things low-key for now, but we're not taking any chances. Amara nodded, understanding. She wasn't sure what the next step would be, but she knew that it was time to stop living in fear. It was time to take control of her own life. Diesel spent the next few hours with her, going over a few practical steps to make sure she was ready if Greg found her. They went over escape routes, making sure she knew where to go and what to do if anything happened. It wasn't just about running. It was about being smart, about having a plan in place. As the sun began to set, Amara felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She had always lived in survival mode, constantly looking over her shoulder, but now she had a plan. She wasn't waiting for Greg to find her. She was ready to take control. That night, after Diesel left, Amara sat on the porch, looking out at the stars. It was a quiet night, the only sound the gentle rustling of the trees in the breeze. She had come so far, and yet she knew the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, she felt like she could face it. She had people who cared about her, people who were willing to fight for her. It wasn't just about being safe anymore. It was about taking her life back, about finding her own way. Forge came out to join her, sitting next to her on the porch. How you holding up? He asked, his voice low and steady. Amara looked over at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. I'm okay, she said, though the weight of it all was still there. I don't know if I'll ever be truly free of him, but I'm trying. Forge nodded, his eyes full of understanding. You will be. It's not about forgetting the past. It's about choosing how you move forward. And you've got that power now. Amara looked out at the stars again, feeling a sense of peace settle inside her. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. And with the bikers by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The days passed quickly as Amara adjusted to the new rhythm of her life. The fear of Greg tracking her down had not entirely faded, but it was slowly being replaced by something stronger, confidence. Forge, Diesel, and the rest of the bikers continued to stand by her, watching over her with unwavering loyalty, ensuring she felt safe. But even with the protection, Amara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She had always been a survivor, constantly alert to every sound, every movement, and it was hard to let go of that part of her. One afternoon, as she sat in the small yard behind the house, watching the wind rustle through the trees, she felt a pang of uncertainty. She had been thinking about the future, her future. What would it look like? Could she truly leave the past behind? Was she ready to live a normal life? Forge had already promised her that they would get her to a safe place, and the bikers had kept their word. They had helped her build a life away from fear, but it wasn't just about running away anymore. It was about rebuilding herself, finding a new purpose, and discovering who she could be without the shadow of her past. As Amara sat there, lost in her thoughts, Diesel walked over, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached. Hey, you okay? He asked, his voice soft, but with a sense of concern. Amara looked up at him and forced a smile. Yeah, I'm fine, she said, though she knew her voice didn't quite match her words. Diesel sat down next to her, his presence solid and steady. You've been quiet lately. Something on your mind? Amara hesitated before answering. I don't know, she said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. I'm still not sure what's next. I mean, I know I'm safe, but I've spent so long running, I don't even know how to stop. Diesel nodded, understanding in his eyes. You've been through a lot, Amara. But you're not running anymore. You're moving forward. That's what counts. Amara glanced at him, her thoughts swirling. But what if I'm not ready? What if I can't really change? Diesel gave her a small smile, one that didn't try to solve her problems, but simply acknowledged her pain. Change doesn't happen all at once. It's a step-by-step process. And you've already taken the biggest step, choosing to keep moving forward. Amara looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had taken that step, hadn't she? She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't waiting for someone to save her. She was part of something now, a family. And in that family, there was strength, not just protection. She was learning that strength, slowly but surely. Diesel's expression softened. You've got a whole group of people behind you. Forge, me, and the rest of us. We're here for you, no matter what. You're not doing this alone. Amara felt her throat tighten, but she managed to hold back the tears. It had been so long since anyone had said something like that to her, and it hit her harder than she expected. She was part of something real now. Thanks, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. Diesel clapped her gently on the back. Anytime. The moment hung in the air for a while before Diesel stood up. Come on, let's get inside. You don't have to have it all figured out today, but we'll be here every step of the way. Amara nodded and stood up with him, feeling a little lighter than she had in days. As they walked inside, she felt the weight of her past, the fear, the uncertainty, but it didn't feel as heavy as it once had. The bikers had given her more than just a place to stay. They had given her a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to grow. The night came quietly, and Amara found herself at the kitchen table with Forge and Diesel, eating a simple meal. As the conversation flowed around her, she realized that for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged. As the evening wore on, Amara found herself sitting outside again, looking up at the stars. It was a peaceful night, the air cool against her skin. The fear of her past still lingered, but it wasn't in control anymore. She was in control, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe, truly breathe. The road ahead was still unknown, but she was ready to face it. She wasn't running from anything anymore. She was building a life, a future, and she wasn't doing it alone. The thought brought her a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. As the stars twinkled above, Amara knew one thing for sure. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, and that was enough. The days passed in a peaceful rhythm that Amara had never known. With every passing morning, the weight on her chest seemed to lift just a little more. The fear of Greg, her past, still lingered at the back of her mind, but it was no longer the constant presence it had once been. Forge, Diesel, and the others had given her more than just safety. They had given her a sense of belonging, something she had been missing for so long. Still, the question of what came next loomed large in her mind. What would her life look like once she was free from the past? Would she be able to live without the constant vigilance, the constant fear? She hadn't quite figured that out yet. It was a quiet afternoon when Forge came to find her. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching her with a knowing look. She had been sitting on the porch, staring out at the horizon, her thoughts a jumble of uncertainty. Mind if I join you? He asked, his voice calm and familiar. Amara gave him a small smile. Of course you can. What's up? Forge walked over and took a seat beside her, his eyes following hers as they both stared out at the field that stretched out in front of the house. It was peaceful here, away from the chaos of her past. I wanted to check in, he said. How are you holding up? Amara shrugged, her gaze still focused on the distance. I'm doing better, she said slowly. But there's still something, I don't know, holding me back. Forge nodded, as though he had expected that answer. It's normal to feel that way. You've been through a lot. You don't just turn off that kind of fear overnight. Amara turned to look at him, her brow furrowed. But how do you move on? I keep thinking about my old life, about everything I've been through, and it's hard to imagine what comes next. Forge studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. The first step is realizing you don't have to carry all that weight anymore. It's not about forgetting your past. It's about taking control of your future. You've already done the hardest part. You've chosen to move forward. Amara looked at him, considering his words. It was hard to imagine moving forward without looking over her shoulder, always waiting for something to go wrong. But Forge was right. She had taken the first step. She had come this far. She had made it through the worst of it, and she wasn't running anymore. I don't know if I can ever truly leave it all behind, she admitted quietly. Forge smiled softly. You don't have to forget it, but you don't have to let it control you either. You're here now, and this is where you start. Every day you're building something new, something better. Amara let his words sink in. Every day she was starting anew, building a future she could finally own. She had been given a second chance, and it was up to her what she did with it. It was a lot to think about, but it felt like a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The bikers had shown her what it meant to be part of something bigger, something that wasn't based on fear. They had shown her the meaning of family, of loyalty, and with their help, she was learning to trust herself again. She could feel the foundation of a new life being built beneath her feet. Thanks, she said, her voice softer now. I don't think I've said that enough, but thank you. Forge clapped her gently on the back. You don't need to thank me, kid. You've earned this. Now, it's time for you to take the next step. Amara nodded, a sense of clarity starting to form in her mind. She was ready to build her own future, ready to start living her life. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be obstacles along the way, but she had already faced the hardest part, and she had the bikers by her side. Later that night, after dinner, Amara sat on the porch again, feeling a quiet peace settle in. It had been a long journey to get here, and there were still many unknowns ahead, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future. She was going to make it her own. The stars twinkled above her, a reminder that the world was vast, and there was so much more out there for her to discover. She wasn't defined by the life she had left behind. She was ready for the life she was about to create. And as she sat there, looking out at the stars, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't known in years. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was living. And with that realization, Amara knew that whatever came next, she could handle it. She had the strength to face whatever the world threw her way, because she wasn't alone. And that, in itself, was the greatest gift of all. Weeks passed, and life in the small house had settled into a new rhythm for Amara. Each day was a quiet victory, a reminder that she had left her past behind and was carving out her own future. She had come a long way from the scared girl who had first arrived here, hiding from the world. The bikers had become her family, not just in the sense of protection, but in the true meaning of the word. They weren't just people she relied on. They were people she could trust, who cared about her and wanted to see her succeed. Forge checked in on her daily, making sure she was adjusting, offering guidance when needed. Diesel, too, had become a steady presence in her life, always ready with a kind word or a quiet conversation when she needed someone to talk to. The other bikers, each with their own rough exterior, had a tenderness to them that Amara had never expected. They had taught her what it meant to be strong, to fight for what was worth fighting for, and to stand up for herself. For the first time in years, Amara was able to focus on something other than survival. The anxiety that once gripped her heart had begun to ease, and slowly but surely, she started to think about her future. It wasn't something that could be planned all at once, but with every passing day, she was beginning to feel that she was moving towards something meaningful. One evening, as the sun set and the air cooled, Amara sat outside on the porch, a mug of tea in her hands. She watched as the sky turned from soft pinks and purples to deep indigo, the stars beginning to emerge. Forge joined her, his presence as steady and solid as ever. He took a seat next to her, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything. It was the kind of silence that didn't need words, comfortable, reassuring. Finally, Forge spoke. "How you feeling?" he asked, his tone gentle but direct. Amara took a deep breath, setting her mug down beside her. "I'm good," she said, the words feeling like they came from a deeper place than they had before. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what you meant about moving forward." Forge nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "It's not easy, but you're doing it, Amara. And it's not about getting it perfect. It's about taking it one day at a time, one step at a time." Amara smiled slightly, her eyes fixed on the stars above. "I never thought I could feel like this. Like I have a chance." Forge looked at her, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You've always had a chance, kid. You just had to decide you were going to take it." Those words hung in the air between them. It was true. For so long, Amara had felt like her life was defined by what had happened to her. The abuse, the fear, the constant feeling of being trapped, it had been all she knew. But now, with every step she took away from that past, she was building something of her own. It wasn't going to be easy. There would still be challenges ahead. But with the bikers beside her, with the strength she had found in herself, she knew she was ready to face whatever came next. A few days later, Amara went into town for the first time since she had arrived at the house. It was a small town, quiet and unassuming, but it felt like a big step. Forge and Diesel had both assured her it was safe, but Amara couldn't shake the nervous excitement she felt. As she walked through the streets, taking in the small shops, the friendly people who waved as she passed, she realized just how far she had come. It was a simple day, one of those moments that might have seemed insignificant to anyone else, but to Amara, it felt like a triumph. She had stepped out into the world again, not as someone hiding from it, but as someone who belonged. When she returned to the house, Forge and Diesel were waiting for her on the porch. "How was it?" Forge asked with a knowing smile. "It was good," Amara said, her eyes bright. "I think I'm ready. I don't know exactly what comes next, but I think I'm ready to take it on." Diesel raised his mug in a silent toast. "That's the spirit." Amara sat down next to him, feeling the weight of those words settle in her heart. She wasn't running anymore. She was living. And for the first time in a long time, she believed that the future was hers to create. She wasn't defined by the past. She was building her own future, one day at a time, surrounded by people who cared. And with each new day, she became stronger, more confident in who she was and who she was becoming. The road ahead was still long, and there were challenges ahead, but Amara knew one thing for sure. She was ready. She was not alone, and that was all she needed to face whatever came next. In this compelling tale of strength, resilience, and survival, we delve deep into the world of a young girl's journey from fear to freedom with the help of unexpected heroes. With the backdrop of Hell Angel stories, this narrative brings to life a story of courage and determination. Following a life of trauma and control under her stepfather, Amara finds herself on a journey with a group of bikers who show her the true meaning of family and loyalty. As the bikers face challenges and danger, they offer Amara the protection she desperately needs, offering a chance for a new beginning. Throughout this series of Hell Angel stories, we see how Amara finds not only refuge but strength, learning to live without fear and embrace a future that had once seemed impossible. As the bikers guide her through moments of tension and uncertainty, Amara begins to rebuild her life, all while grappling with the past she can't quite escape. The Hell Angel stories in this narrative are not just about surviving. They're about thriving, rebuilding, and facing the future head-on, armed with the support of those who care. In the end, Amara realizes that, while her past will always be part of her, she now has the power to choose her future. Through these Hell Angel stories, the message is clear. Even in the darkest times, there is always a way forward, and no one is ever truly alone.